How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? It's Sally Pots and Pants here, coming to you live with the UFC Jacksonville Fight Night predictions and analysis. That's today on a Wednesday on a UFC card. This could be the greatest new trend that Dana White has ever started. So, the first fight of the night, we have a minus 185 favorite in Omar Morales versus Gabriel Mowgli Benitez, who's moving up to 155 pounds. And right off the bat, I think you can say that Mowgli has more experience versus higher-end competition, but ultimately, I don't think his frame is really ideal for the lightweight division because strength involved and even height and reach, he's not even completely filled out for this weight class, and I've already seen the weigh-ins. I've seen everyone. So I know he isn't really a true 155er, and Omar Morales has a ton of power in his leg kicks, and he's a gigantic lightweight in that. He's about 5'10", and has a 6'2" reach, versus Mowgli, who's 5'8", and not even that much of a powerful, thick frame. I ultimately do think Gabriel Benitez does have the skill to cause Omar Morales some problems, but I do think Omar Morales is eventually going to melt him with the power and the range control, because I do think Gabriel Benitez is going to have a lot of issues entering a boxing range and trying to clinch up and get grappling exchanges with this guy. And if he's just coming in throwing those naked leg kicks like we've seen him throw in the past, he's going to get caught with an uppercut or a low leg kick combination coming in, and it's going to be a short night for him. Second fight of the night, we have the returning UFC vet Chase Sherman versus the newcomer Ike Villanueva. Ike Villanueva has shown some decent level of competition on the regional scene before coming to the UFC. And Chase Sherman left the UFC because he couldn't beat the bottom of the barrel competition at the heavyweight division. Ultimately, he's coming back after a good spell at Island Fights and BKFC. But I think that his best days are so far behind him now, and ultimately, I do think that he can impose a game plan and a style where he could actually wear out Ike Villanueva and hold him against the fence and grind on him and make it an extremely boring heavyweight fight that no one wants to see, that I am expecting. But ultimately, I do think Ike Villanueva poses enough threats on the feet to be able to give Chase Sherman some problems. And even though Ike Villanueva has fought a lot of his fights at 205 pounds, I think this is going to be a really good fight and coming out party for him to get an underdog win at about plus 140. Next up, we have the Dana White Contender Series winner Hunter Azure versus my teammate and training partner Brian Kelleher out of 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. Incoming biased answer, ladies and gentlemen. I'm picking Brian at plus 170, and Hunter Azure is plus 200. I'm minus 200. Brian Kelleher is plus 170. Right off the bat, I think this is a tailor-made matchup for Brian because people do underestimate his ability in transition to catch guillotines and throw powerful shots leaving the clinch. He is a grizzled vet. He's put in the work on the regional scene. He's fought guys like Julio Arce and fought the who's who in the division, even though he hasn't beaten the John Linekers, but he has a win over the former champion, Renan Barão. I do think Hunter Azure is going to get exposed for being too green in this because I do think that 8 fights that he has is very limited, and all he really does impose is a very folk-style wrestling heavy game plan, and he doesn't set up his takedowns that well, and I think Brian, a black belt in Gi Jiu-Jitsu and a brown belt in No Gi at 10th Planet, that I think he's going to pose some problems for Hunter Azure, and ultimately I think he's going to get him out of there, whether that be a guillotine choke or a knockout exiting the clinch up against the cage, because Brian likes a pressure-heavy style. He's got heavy hands, and he can mix it up pretty well. This fight's being fought at 145 pounds, even though both these guys are at 135 due to the quarantine circumstances. Hunter Azure is actually a couple inches taller than Brian. But I can speak from personal experience. Brian is gigantic. I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. Brian's probably like 5'7", 165. He's a pretty big guy, and he glides across the mat, and people underestimate his ability just because of a loss against John Lineker, who's a perennial top 5 contender in 125 and 135 pounds because of how good he is. He just got booted from the UFC because he can't consistently make it to the octagon. So with that being said, my underdog card of the night, I'm going to go with Brian Kelleher to win by finish over Hunter Azure, because although he has a taller stature, he's not going to win. Oh, man. Oh, jeez. 135 pounds. Sijara Eubanks versus Sarah Moras. All right, these are two middle-of-the-pack, extremely low-experience fighters right off the bat. You're willing to lay it down minus 400 on someone with a 4-4 record. You're fucking crazy. If you put anything on this fight, I don't even know what is good with you, ladies and gentlemen. But Sarah Moras is coming in at a 6-5 record at plus 300. Might as well just take the stab, because Sijara Eubanks, low-key, doesn't have the ability to absolutely destroy and overpower these girls at 135 pounds, because she's actually only 5'3" or 5'4". She's not that big. She's just absolutely not disciplined and terrible at cutting weight. So I do think this is a good opportunity for an underdog win. But with that being said, how could you be fairly certain on who's even going to win this fight? Because these two girls are so inconsistent. I mean, I can't give you any real insight, because as soon as you think that one of these girls are going to implement a game plan that could win them a fight that they should easily win, they either gas out or cannot follow the game plan, and it's nearly impossible for them to be worth any of their value. I don't even think plus 300 is worth it for this girl, but to be honest, you just got to take the dog here and just pass, because this fight is a joke. Okay, this is probably one of the most slept on exciting fights of the night, in my opinion. We've got the grizzled vet Michael Johnson coming back up to 155 pounds, versing Thiago Moises, the son of the Brazilian grappling legend who hasn't found too much success in the UFC. Although he did get beaten by Damir Ismagulov, who's a pretty high-end prospect right here. I just think Thiago Moises, although he's a lot younger and at ATT, I don't think he's a complete mixed martial artist and can mix it well together. I don't really have much faith in his offensive wrestling game, even though Michael Johnson seems to show zero urgency once he's taken to the mat, and seems almost helpless at times when he's grappling. But with that being said, I think there's a huge discrepancy of skill on the feet here. Michael Johnson out of the southpaw stance is incredibly fast and rangy with his boxing. I think he's really going to put the pressure on Thiago Moises and get him out of there in the first round. The fact that this is an even money pick'em fight, this is a steal for Michael Johnson, in my opinion. Although he's on a huge losing streak and you cannot trust him at all, I do think this just comes down to Thiago Moises is just not a UFC ready fighter. I think he has the skills to craft into being a good UFC fighter, but I don't think his short amount of time at ATT is going to be enough to beat a vet like this in Michael Johnson. So I'm going to take Michael Johnson by first round knockout. Moving off of the prelims to the main card, we've got Andrei Arlovsky versus Philippe Lins. Well, I could tell you how this is being set up from a marketing perspective. They're trying to build up a prospect and make a name off Arlovsky. If you can't get past his decent footwork and volume at the heavyweight division, you have no business being here. So they're expecting Philippe Lins, another guy that trains out of ATT, just like Arlovsky. So I'm wondering how the training's going for this fight. This is going to be a little weird. But with that being said, I was at Arlovsky's last fight versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik at UFC 244. Made a terrible account for himself in his last 5 fights. Probably got screwed out of a few super close decisions that he lost. But on the other hand, I think his best days are behind him. And ultimately, I'm going to go with Philippe Lins because he's ultimately more athletic and more powerful, and you just got to have to trust his chin because Orlovsky can't take a punch. He got knocked out by a jab. Versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Not saying Jairzinho Rozenstruik's not talented or powerful, but if you're getting knocked out by a jab, I think it's time to walk away. Yeah. Philippe Lins, minus 160. I think that's the move by knockout. Moving up next, the prospect deciding fight. I really like this one. Carl Baby K. Roberson versus Marvin Vettori. Marvin Vettori coming in at minus 200. Baby K at plus 165. Okay. So right off the bat, Marvin Vettori training at a King's MMA with Kelvin Gastelum. Willing to take a punch. Really heavy volume and pressure-oriented style. Really had a lot of answers for guys like Andrew Sanchez when he fought him. Very, very impressive win. Carl Roberson, extremely good at kickboxing, has got insane power, but I do not think he has the ability to withstand punches under pressure and get backed up against the cage like Vettori does, and doesn't show as much of a willingness to brawl. Vettori, although doesn't actually try for takedowns, he clinches up, punches, and throws elbows leaving the clinch. And if anyone tries to take him down, he's very, very quick to just engage in the clinch. If you saw in his fight versus Andrew Sanchez, threw him off, went right back after him, and started getting back into attacking range to get with his punches and throwing them in combination. And that's where he ultimately had a ton of success in his last fight. Baby K kind of got exposed when I saw his fight versus Glover Teixeira. He got on him real fucking fast. He dropped his ass, got reversed at a full mount, and got finished on the ground. He's very green on the ground. I don't think Vettori is going to result to that game plan, and that ultimately is going to make this a super fun, exciting fight. And I see there a good possibility that Baby K could eke out a split decision right here. But ultimately, I do think Marvin Vettori is fighting with a chip on his shoulder because of his split decision loss to Adesanya. He's training at a great camp. He's got great training partners. His last fight, he made an amazing account for himself. I really do think he's going to go out here and put on a great performance. I don't think he's going to get the finish because Carl Roberson's pretty tough, especially on the feet with his kickboxing background and training with Corey Anderson and Frankie Edgar, Marlon Moraes out in New Jersey. But I'm going to take Marvin Vettori by a decision. But on DraftKings, I would look at him as a high perceived value pick because this guy throws out a ton of volume for the 185-pound division. Moving on next, we have Ray Borg coming up to 135 pounds again after missing weight an incredible amount of times versus Ricky the Mullet Man Simone. Oh, baby, coming off a 2-fight losing streak off of Rob Font and Uriah Faber. And also, he did beat Merab Dvalishvili, who's also training out of Long Island here. But he was getting beaten pillar to post until that sketchy submission that was called while Merab was still up, but we'll be willing to look past that. Ultimately, I don't like to say that size is a deciding factor in a lot of fights, but ultimately this is what it comes down to. Ray Borg had trouble against Casey Kenny. It was a close fight. Ricky Simone, although he's 5'6" and he's only 2 inches taller than Ray Borg, his frame is gigantic, and he really imposes a physical style, game plan, grinding, heavy pressure style. I really think Ray Borg's going to have a lot of issues taking pressure and trying to be under firepower from Ricky Simone, constantly blending together these strikes, getting him up against the fence, trying to shoot relentless takedowns, chaining them together, making him work. I don't know if Ricky Simone has the ability to get Ray Borg out of there, but I do think he is going to put a clinic on him with the takedowns. Another pick on DraftKings where I think he's going to be a lot worth it. Ricky Simone coming in at minus 190. I really do like the Mullen Man right here to rebound off his 2-fight skid. He fought 2 guys that are perennial top 10s at 135. A little bit too quick, too soon, but I do think Ricky Simone has the size and skill set to be able to get this decision decisively versus Ray Borg. 155 pounds. This is a great fight right here. We got the kickboxer, a.k.a. side model, Drew Dober, versus Alexander Hernandez, a.k.a. Man Tits, my boy, who got knocked out by Donald Cerrone that I saw live, which was fucking crazy. But ultimately, Drew Dober does have very crisp hands and good striking defense, and ultimately the guys that give him issues are ones that can implement a grinding style and blend a real mixed martial arts fight together. And although I do think Drew Dober has a big advantage in the stand-up, and I don't think Alexander Hernandez's movement and volume is what is going to cause Drew Dober problems, I think Drew Dober is going to give Hernandez problems early in the fight, and then as the fight progresses and he mixes it up and can implement a grappling-oriented game plan like he did versus OAM, I think he's going to be able to put Drew Dober in similar situations that he had versus OAM and Beneil Dariush and be able to make this a close fight. But ultimately, I do think Hernandez is going to go the path of least resistance and try to grapple with Drew Dober and mix everything up. Because if he's got him guessing to stop takedowns and mixing it in with these strikes, it's going to be a lot harder for him to implement that kickboxing style. Drew Dober coming off a vicious knockout win over Nasrat Haqparast, who was honestly getting hyped up as one of the big prospects at 155 pounds because he trains at a TriStar with GSP and Firas Zahabi. But this is also another pick'em fight right off the bat, and I'm going to say Alexander Hernandez does have the higher ceiling out of these two. I do think both of them could be top 15 guys, but you know how the lightweight division is. You could cycle out of unranked and right at the edge of top 15 as many times as you want for 5 years. But I do think Alexander Hernandez can get Drew Dober out of here by either a submission or a close decision. And now moving to the co-main event, the heavyweight debut for Ovince St. Preux, the University of Tennessee linebacker, going against Big Ben Rothwell, the hairy beast himself. Right off the bat, I wanted to say that Ovince St. Preux is going to go out here and destroy Ben Rothwell with his movement, but I don't know if his power is going to directly translate that well. Ben Rothwell is gigantic. He has very awkward movement, just like OSP, and OSP does seem to have problems when he gets pressured, and ultimately, I don't know if he is going to be able to move around and withstand that pressure, because he's shown in the 205-pound division, if you walk him down and put him against the cage, he has a susceptibility to getting knocked out and being timid and doesn't want to fire back. He did look a little thick. He didn't look like he naturally filled into the weight class. It looks like he just didn't cut weight. A little chunky, but he still has muscle. Ben Rothwell also looking big. And my initial pick was Ovince St. Preux, but right here I do think Ben Rothwell's awkward movement and pressure-oriented style is going to be enough to get him this win, unless OSP gets a quick head kick knockout and sets something up with his super athletic frame and footwork. I do think Ben Rothwell is going to get this W right here, because his size and awkward movement as well is a carbon copy of what's given OSP problems in the past. If you're just willing to eat a punch, walk him down, and box with him in the pocket, get him up against the cage, that's the fight he doesn't want to fight, and that's not what is going to be what Ben Rothwell isn't going to do. So I'm going to take Ben Rothwell by knockout. Yeah, it's time for the main event. All right, so we got minus 200, Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira, the light heavyweight bout. Whoever wins this is getting recycled back into contendership picture, right back up into the top three. Anthony Smith has been exposed on the ground multiple times. Glover Teixeira has a very pressure-oriented style and likes to get in close, but he has shown a susceptibility to uppercuts and front attacks. Anthony Smith, although willing to bite down on his mouthpiece and brawl, he does like to pick at his opponents at range, and that's why he was having more issues versus John Jones, because he couldn't implement his game plan and style that he favors. But ultimately, in this 5-round fight, I do think Glover Teixeira has what it takes to give Anthony Smith some problems, because Anthony Smith sometimes likes to get creative with the sweeps, gets himself into some bad positions on the ground, and that's where Glover capitalizes. Very good top pressure, very good at ground and pound, submission attacks, arm triangles, not giving up position, passing into half guard, staying there, controlling his opponents. But I do think his chin is not there anymore. And Anthony Smith does have the skill set to just be able to pick him apart on the feet and get him out of there in a round or two. Anthony Smith, after his home intruder fight and his long layoff since his John Jones fight, I think he's going to come back with something to prove. And I think Anthony Smith's going to go out there and win by early knockout in the first or second round. But guys, don't be surprised if Anthony Smith gets put into some fucking trouble on the ground, because we've seen in other fights, if you set up a takedown and blend stuff well and get him overextending on his long jabs and long straight punches, you could get him down very easily. Glover Teixeira is very powerful, very experienced on the ground. Do not be surprised if he starts giving Smith problems early. But I do think Anthony Smith has a chip on his shoulder. He has the ability to make the in-cage adaptations to get this win and get back up into the title picture. I think another awesome fight. If he wins this, after Thiago Santos' return, is their rematch. Anthony Smith versus Thiago Santos rematch at 205 instead of 185. I think that would be an awesome fight. I do still favor Thiago Santos, but we will see who wins this. And guys, thank you very much for watching. Please drop a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all later. Peace.